All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here to our Lumen Humans. It's Champions Diversity Month, and we are super excited for our programming partnership with you, Elizabeth, and Breaking the Glass, and to all of our incredible panelists who are here with us to share your wisdom and stories around empowering others as we continue to celebrate and champion diversity all year. But in October, we're really focused on looking back and reflecting on the amazing things we've done to celebrate diversity and inclusion and belonging across Lumen all year long, and really bringing everyone together this month to celebrate that and to empower each other, which I know you're all going to talk about. Our theme is educate, elevate, and empower. And with that, I just want to thank all of you for being with us, from our panelists and Elizabeth from Breaking the Glass, and to all of our employees for all that you do every day to help us create an inclusive workplace at Lumen where we can all feel like we're part of the Lumen family and where we all belong.
Perfect. Thank you, Karen. But yeah, again, before we get started, just, thank you to Lumen Humans. That's a great name. And Karen for allowing us to come in and host our session. We've gathered a great group of speakers that are all very involved with their communities and look to empower those around them. I'm excited for this panel, but before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to introduce myself. I'm Elizabeth Lamb. I'm the Partnerships Manager for Breaking the Glass. What we do is we partner with tech companies and nonprofits to provide free personalized programming on diversity, inclusion, and women's career development topics. We've provided webinars for our partners like Walmart, Dell, IBM, and Charter Communications. I'll be putting some information in the chat on how you can get more connected with our community and get involved. But yeah, in just a moment, I'll be going on mute and off video so I can provide those resources. But yeah, if you want to chat in any comments, do that in the chat. But if you want to ask our panelists a question, do that in the Q&A box, which is like right under the panelists' talking heads. And so we'll go through our pre-written panel questions, and then we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So we'll be able to answer any of your questions. And if you want to talk directly to the panelists, you can raise your hand, and then I can unmute you so that you can have dialogue as well, which could be a lot of fun as well. Well, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Susan Mire, who's going to be our moderator, and have her introduce ourselves, then our panelists will introduce ourselves, and then we'll get into the good meat of the content.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you everyone for letting me be a part of this discussion. I'm really happy to be here. Just to kind of give a quick overview of myself. I am a senior recruiter at Computer Futures, and I place people within the business intelligence and data analytics space. So mainly in the tech space in general, but along with that, I am a pretty big advocate for our ESG community and for our Breaking the Glass Foundation that Elizabeth runs. So I definitely have been trying to find any ways that I can be a part of our community. And I think a lot of that involves empowering others within the community. So I'm really happy to be a part of this discussion and just moderate as you guys kind of give your your 2 cents about what you guys do in your own communities. So with that said, I'd love to kind of just start off with some introductions, but if Susan, if you want to take it away and introduce yourself, that would be great.
Hi, I'm Susan Wands. I am a senior developer with a local startup here doing called Lowrider Security, revolutionizing SOAR. But also I am the founder of Women in Tech Allies, which is in the Raleigh-Durham area. We have about 1,700 members, and we focus our programming on local tech talks and D&I discussions. And so that's what I do around here. Feel free to join in from anywhere because a lot of our stuff is virtual given COVID. So maybe you can stop in and see some of our events.
Thank you, Susan. And Blanca, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, my name is Blanca Leon Carter. I'm joining from Chicago, Illinois. I am a Salesforce consultant over at Slalom and also Salesforce MVP. And part of being an MVP is giving back to the community and how do you help each other out. I also help co-lead a nonprofit organization called Rad Women. And we train individuals who identify as being a woman or non-binary on how to code for the Salesforce system so that they can transition into more technical roles.
Amazing. Thank you, Blanca. And then lastly, Amanda, do you want to go?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda. I go by she, her, and hers. I am based out of Houston. I'm a new transplant from Austin, Texas. So if you have any good Houston recommendations for anyone out there, send them my way. I am the head of HR business partners for a tech company that's actually headquartered out of Toronto. I've only been there 2 weeks. So at my last company, I spent a lot of time in the diversity and inclusion space, whether that was spearheading all of our employee resource groups. I also co-chair one of the allies groups across our parent company. So it's open to 16,000 different employees. And then I'm also very involved in Big Brothers Big Sisters here in Texas. So that's a little bit about me. Looking forward to meeting all of you.
Nice. Thanks for introducing yourselves. We have a great group here, so it's going to be a really engaging conversation. So honestly, just to kind of start things off, I feel like the first step to empowering others in general is building trust. So first kind of question is just, how has trust really impacted your ability to support your colleagues? And if Blanca, you want to start, go ahead. Obviously, this is a very open conversation, so we'd love to hear from everyone.
Yeah, this is a great question, and one that I'm very passionate about because I have had several different experiences, and I could say that not all of them have been very supportive, and I haven't always felt that I could trust some of my colleagues. So with that said, I will share that it is very contagious when you actually meet a group of individuals that really have good intentions and show up to give back and help others. I feel that that was an area that was a little bit more foreign for me, being a woman in tech. And when I finally found it at a, mid-career, I was like, why couldn't everyone experience this, right? I think trust can be very tricky, right? I think first we need to look within ourselves and be honest to ourselves. What are our values and what are we passionate about? Where are our interests and where do we want to invest time in helping others? That's probably one of the biggest ones, right? Is being honest to yourself and to others. I think communication, how you communicate, how you treat other people, and being consistent, right, with what you're doing and what you're saying, and the frequency of your involvement in giving back is another area where you can help build trust. And most importantly, follow through, right? So your values and your morals and your passion areas need to drive what it is that you actually do, right? So whatever promises you make or wherever you decide to invest time, don't leave people hanging. It's not super cool, and it's a fast way to lose trust, right? Not building it. So make sure that you're consistent and authentic in where you're giving to others and helping them out. And then I will just say one that doesn't always come easy is share your experiences, even if they're challenging ones that are difficult to talk about, because a lot of times there is someone else out there who is in the same place and they don't realize that they're not alone, and they don't realize what you have overcome, and they may just think, oh, there's this nicely painted picture of this woman professional, and she's probably never encountered the types of things that I did, and chances are that is not true. They probably have a lot of good stories to share with you. So anytime that you can share your experiences to help someone understand how you overcame things and how you dealt with things and how you sought out support, I think is always a good thing. And then lastly, one that's really important is be inclusive. I know that it is very easy to kind of find your favorite people you like to work with, or different teams within organizations. If there's silos, it may be difficult, but try to be as mindful as possible and making sure that you are being inclusive of everyone.
Those are some really good points. Oh, Susan, do you want to add something?
Can I chime in on trust? I think that, being able to trust that you can be in an environment and it's going to be positive and safe is very often one of the barriers that we experience with diversity in technology, particularly women coming into technology. And you see it went from an all the way from the educational side of things, all the way straight up through professional development. So like for an example I like to frequently use is if you are one of like three, everyone goes through computer science, if they go through computer science in school, right? And it has a lot of very challenging classes at the very beginning. You have this tendency to create groups to study and groups to kind of support each other. And that kind of dynamic gets thrown off if you're one of only one or two or three women in your class. When you go and seek out somebody to partner with, it can be sometimes construed as something different, right? Because you have that whole dynamic happening, other dynamics that can be assumed. So that's one of the reasons why they tend not to create partnerships. They tend not to have support groups, and they tend to drop out of those classes because they don't have the same kind of support system that everyone else would have, right? The same thing you experience when you start to network. Right. I remember one of my very first networking events after I got out of boot camp. I showed up at a Microsoft event, great company, great things, right? And the first questions I got were things like, "Oh, are you here with your boyfriend?" Right? And a group of 80 and a room full of 80 people. Why would that be the first question I was asked? Right. Or, what recruiting firm are you with? Because you certainly couldn't be here as a technologist, right? So does that create a safe space for someone to come and network and meet new people and try to build their career? Mentorship within a company. There's already a lot of issues where people feel like they're a little unsure about, how do I mentor somebody who is maybe younger than me and also female? Well, I'm a guy. I mean, is it going to be taken wrong? How do I properly do that and make sure that they feel safe and they feel like, it's not going to be taken some way that maybe is out of context or shouldn't be, right? So a lot of these types of issues, especially when you get to diversity, blossoming more diversity and more in your group, being able to create that sense of trust that, look, I understand that this could be construed this way. I want to just address it right off the bat. Let's set up some ground rules, boundaries, things like that, so that we know, like, I'm here to help you. I'm here to be a support system for you. I'm not here for anything else. How do we move you forward, right? I think sometimes addressing possible issues right off the bat kind of takes them off the table and leaves room for trust, leaves room for like, okay, now I feel like this person understands where I'm coming from. And I have the trust tree and the nest, right? By directing it, the conversation right off the bat to address some of those things. So, then people can trust that it's going to be okay,
Yeah, I love that. And I think that was really interesting and such a good kind of story to bring up about what you went through. I guess going into the second question. So, empowering others may not always look like a direct conversation or action. What are some leadership styles that you all engage in to empower your team? And Amanda, if you want to go first, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So just again, expanding a little bit on what Susan and Blanca already said around building trust, I think one of the big pieces that ties really well into how to empower your team is to also really lead with vulnerability and being courageous in your actions. And what I mean by that is it's so easy, whether you're actually leading a team at work, whether you're leading a group outside of work, whether you're seen as a mentor to people, is to put up this wall that you have to have all the answers or you have to know everything. I think it really goes a long way to be able to say, I don't know, right? It's something we don't love saying, but I think it really empowers others to step up and say, I don't know, but do you have the answer? Or what are your ideas? Or really empowering them to put the ball back in their court. And again, showing them that as a leader, you don't always have the answers either. So that empowers them to then realize I can be vulnerable in a space too. And I think that also plays really well into one of the biggest pieces about empowering others, which is practicing empathy as a leader. And again, leader can mean so many different things, right? It doesn't have to just translate over to the corporate world. But I think Blanca mentioned this, as far as being empathetic, you have no idea what is going on in someone else's life. And we all have experienced some of the most tumultuous years in our entire lives, in the entire world, right? In the last 2 years, whether it's a global pandemic and still being in the midst of it, being stuck working from home for a lot of us, going through natural disasters, and that's not even counting all the personal things that are in our lives as well. There's a lot of mental health concerns. And so understanding that people are going through so many different things and taking that into consideration also empowers them to feel like, okay, I actually can take time for myself, or I don't always have to be on all the time. I think that really speaks volumes for understanding people. And then to, I think, Blanca's point, just really being more inclusive. So some of the other ways that I think you can easily empower people is to, especially in the workplace, give people stretch assignments or projects so they feel like they have an opportunity to do something else more than what's really in their current job description of saying, you know, this may not fall within the realm of the scope of your work, but I really think you can handle it. Or maybe this is something that I would normally do, but I want you to take it on because I trust that you have the capability to do that. And then similarly, really getting people in roles or in projects or whatever where they're visible within the leadership. And again, that can go for post-corporate world as well. But one of the biggest ways we try and empower, especially women at work, because women tend to be more in the background and don't speak up as much, is really just putting them in positions where when we recognize them, the leadership team is always aware, or they're getting credit for the work they're doing. I know that's such a huge issue right now, is are you actually getting credit for all the things that you've done behind the scenes? And I think that's really key, is getting that visibility. And then the other one I know we're going to talk about a little bit more later, but is just actually giving people feedback. And I think that goes into both the positive recognition bucket and constructive. So constructive might not seem like, well, how is that empowering me? But if you don't give someone constructive feedback, they're never going to grow, and they're never going to know what they did incorrectly so they can get to the next level, right? So that's key in growth, along with positivity, and really, really making sure you're telling someone when they did a great job, and not just them, but highlighting that across the organization, whatever that might look like.
Yeah, no, that definitely, I completely agree. I think just like thinking about these things and how they're actually put into place in companies is like so important. So I love the advice that you gave. So this one is for colleagues, honestly, I think, or, you know, it could be peers too, but for colleagues that are ready for a change, but have the mentality of, you know, they don't know what they don't know kind of thing, or, you know, like what they don't know what hasn't been put in front of them. In these cases, how do you provide access to resources that might benefit them? Susan, what do you think?
I think that there's a lot of different, when it comes to like career growth or taking next steps, there's a couple of different things that are important. A lot of the time as somebody's career grows, yes, there's more education that they might need. So being able to provide that, but I think that being able to seek out somebody who's in the direction that you want to go, and kind of being able to pick their brain on what that means. Sometimes we think that, you know, what you think from the outside you might need is totally different than what the actual path to get there is. Being able to pick apart somebody's experience, right? So I think that one way is really expanding your network in the direction that you'd like to go. It's one of the things that we try to do with Women in Tech Allies, in that we have, you know, people from all different parts of the software world in one place, right? So, you know, everything from project management and like the project side of things, the development side of things, the QA part of things, the business, you know, CTO level of things. And so if there's a direction that you want to go in, at least there's some way for you to get a picture or a view to peek in and see, what does that mean? Like, what am I supposed to be doing? What kind of projects should I be taking on? What kind of responsibilities should I be focusing on? What kind of certifications might I need? What do I think I need that I really don't need at all? Because, you know, they're going to tell you need these certifications, but really, half the people who are doing the job don't have those at all, right? So that's important. The other aspect of that, though, is figuring out kind of what your strengths are and what you like to do, and being able to explore those things. So I think that that's one way that companies can really help as well, is giving people a chance to kind of dip their toe in different parts of the next step and see what resonates, right? It's really interesting to sometimes you pick your head up, you look around in your career and you're like, why am I doing what I'm doing? Because I'm not sure if I like it, right? How do I get a chance to maybe pivot? Giving people a chance to pivot internally by taking on projects that are in a certain direction and seeing if that might be a better fit or a next fit, things like that. It's a great way for companies to retain people and also grow people, right? It's also a way for people to start to pivot into a direction that maybe they might not have been, if you have an area where you might not have seen yourself before, there's not a lot of representation there in a particular area. That's a way for you to start expanding representation in that area. So like if you're looking at it from a developer standpoint, when you look at the distribution of diversity and inclusion in terms of development, you see a lot more diversity and inclusion in the front end of a tech stack than in the DevOps part of his tech stack, right? So what opportunities might you have on your dev teams to get more of your women and diverse hiring, diverse backgrounds involved in the DevOps side of your tech stack, right? And start giving that experience and giving that opportunity to kind of flex those muscles. You might be responsible as a company for helping to shift some of that in terms of being able to start creating more diverse and depth of knowledge that can get, again, spread out into the community. I know when I'm trying to find a speaker to come in and talk about DevOps, and I'm looking for someone who's diverse and possibly a woman who can create that, image of I can see myself there, right? For the community, that's very challenging to even find that person. What if your company can develop that person, right? So, giving people a chance to maybe expand a little bit.
Can I just add in here, because I went through something personal career-wise, well, both professional and personal. But I had a recent promotion to senior consultant, and I haven't been a consultant for many years. I'm just short of 2 years, right? I was in the nonprofit field managing operations in IT, and then I was working as a Salesforce admin on the CRM team in higher ed. And I never really knew what it was like to be a consultant, right? So to what Susan said, having a space where people can ask questions about what it means to take on a role like that's new, or what types of responsibilities and what gap areas do they need to focus on. Fast forward, when I got this last promotion, part of the panel who was reviewing it asked, well, where does she want to be in 5 years? And I was stumped. They didn't ask me this. They asked my people leader this, and she managed a question. But she came back and she said, how interesting that they asked me this. And I said, honestly, I don't know the answer. And it was pondering in my head for days, and then it was weeks. And I'm like, why is this bothering me so much? I'll tell you why. And a good friend of mine helped me to see this because I couldn't see it. She said, you need to dream bigger. The problem was the 2 goals that I had for myself as a professional since I was a teenager. I've met those goals already, a little faster than I had expected. So here I am having to think again, oh, well, what does the next stage feel like? Because I got here and I didn't realize that. So what's the new bigger thing that I want to spend my time investing for my career and growing myself? So I think that companies need to be on the lookout, because that happens often. And a lot of times you want to be the company to retain them. So help them see that and help them continue to grow and have bigger dreams.
Yeah, and I feel like the whole time you guys have been speaking, it's just so interesting. I feel like the scariest part is honestly speaking up or even just questioning your own ability. And so having allies like you all and everyone else in this community, I think it's hope. I mean, obviously, I think it's going to really help transform as we continue going on in life. But such great points. So thank you for sharing your experiences. So the next one is, managers and mentors should be trusted people in your network to provide feedback. So this is a little bit about the going back into the feedback thing, Amanda, but what are some tactics that you use to deliver feedback to your team? So if you want to kind of elaborate on what you were touching on before, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. First, I want to start this with saying you don't have to be someone's manager or mentor to feel like you are capable to give someone feedback. And I think just in general, we are so reluctant to do that because no one loves to have hard conversations. Even if it's some small piece of feedback, it's never easy, right? And you don't know how that person is going to take it, but just think how much better that person could be if you gave them that piece of feedback. And just as a very small example, when I was in college, I was the president of an organization, and my best friend started telling me, you never smile in meetings. Like, it's to the point where people think you're angry, and you need to start smiling if you're going to be sitting at the front of the room every single week. So she used to actually hold up a sign and stand in the back of the room, and it said smile. And that is something I think of every single time I have to present. And it's something I've had to actively work on for years since college. But I think about what would have happened had she not been honest and given me that feedback. I might have had to give that feedback some point later, or people would just go through my presentations for the rest of my life thinking I was angry. So again, it's something that could be as small as that really does make a huge difference for people. So that's my first takeaway, is don't feel like, again, you are not qualified to give someone feedback. The other piece is that I think is probably the hardest, is you actually have to do it. We see this across the board with managers. And so if managers are scared to give feedback, the rest of the world is going to be as well. But you actually need to really, again, think of all the benefits of why you should be doing that as well. And some of the really tactical things you can do to make sure you keep yourself accountable for that is, first, just write everything down and practice it. So go through all the things that you want to talk about as far as what that feedback looks like. And also, don't sugarcoat it. So it needs to be honest. It needs to be, okay, well, if this person is only doing something that I feel is very harmful or it's constructive, then don't do the compliment sandwich. That exists for a reason, and you should only use it if it's actually relevant. So that is a big piece too, right? Is you need to practice, go over the pieces if you're nervous. And then if you are in maybe more of a corporate environment and you have the ability to do so, you can also keep yourself accountable by doing it on a consistent basis. So maybe you have like quarterly check-ins, monthly check-ins, whatever the case is, but it's that designated time where you know you're going to be able to give that feedback to someone right away. And then the other piece is that make sure you're, again, empowering people to give feedback to others. So if you are a manager in a role, maybe instead of you giving your team's feedback to each person individually and doing like the peer feedback sessions, you actually have your team give it to each other. We started doing this on my team maybe 4 years ago, and this is the best way we could have ever started building trust. We did it on a quarterly basis where every single team member would have to set up time with one another to give feedback about each other. Instead of coming to me, I didn't want to solve the issues for them. I wanted them to work it out together. And what it caused was this communications loop. It caused them to be more open and trusting. And then what actually happened is, instead of meeting on a quarterly basis, they all started setting up weekly one-on-ones with each other. And during that time, they would talk about any issues they had, to the point where I barely knew if something happened because they'd already taken care of it by the time someone told me, which is amazing. But you think about really how that empowered the team, how that really built trust, not just with me, but with each other. And then the last piece too is I also had them give feedback to me as their manager, which was not easy. It's not always the most fun experience. But I think, again, as a leader, you have to be courageous to say, I'm not perfect either. I'm sure there are things you would love to change about me, and I want to hear them too. And so we started doing that on a quarterly and a monthly basis as well. So that's my very tactical advice. But my biggest piece is, don't be afraid to do it. I think feedback is so crucial, and that's both the constructive feedback and positive. I don't like to say negative because feedback is supposed to be something you can grow from, which is why it's constructive. But then also just don't be afraid to share the positive feedback. I think there's a lot of really great things that we see people do in this world that we don't actually tell them. So why not say, hey, I noticed you were part of this webinar. You did an amazing job presenting. And a small compliment can really go a long way as well. And nice plug in there, Elizabeth, about some feedback. I love it.
I feel like it also really shows that you're leading by example, though, because if everyone else below you is kind of doing it to the point where you didn't even have to, everything was already figured out before it even got to, I feel like that shows that things are working well. It's like a supply chain thing. But
I think I would like to add one thing on this, because it's great, Amanda, that your team, was able to do that one-on-one and do it for the team individually and give you feedback. I think sometimes, especially if you're at a bigger company, you may have someone who provides you feedback, but it's about the company and an area that you don't have control over, right? I think that as a manager taking in that feedback, part of our job is to make sure that we're not letting that feedback sit and get stale somewhere. And we need to make sure that we amplify and help voice the feedback that's coming in, positive and not so positive, right? Because you need to make sure that the company is going to be suitable all around and not just one department for who you have working there.
That's such a good call, and I love that, Blanca.
Yeah, I would say on feedback is tremendously important, because one, it allows somebody to actually, determine, this is the stuff that I'm doing right, I need to keep doing it. This is the stuff that maybe I need to work on, so I need to grow. And if it's given improperly, or if it's not given in the correct spirit, a lot of the time it can be one of the things that kind of pushes people out of a space. And so it is supremely important. I would say that feedback that's positive should be loud and public and private and everything, right? Like, and then I like to try to make feedback that is constructive more about explaining why it is the way that it is. So like, for example, if you're, I'll go back to development world again, right? If you see something headed in the wrong direction and you're trying to get some feedback in terms of that, this is, the way that you're going is this. And in the past, when I've seen this, these are the bad things that can happen from that. Right. And so there's providing that like context around it and saying, so that's why we probably need to steer it back in this direction, and this would be the right action steps to kind of work through it. Or at that point, what do you think some ideas on what your next steps are to bring it back in a particular direction? So the feedback in terms of something constructive, adding that little step of what are the next steps you think, kind of gets that buy-in and that inclusion in, like, it's self gets their own thought process and buy-in into bringing it in the right direction, right? And a lot of that kind of stuff I try to keep empowering in, you have control over the direction that this is going. And also, if it's something that's not super positive, I try to keep the group that's in small, because I want to amplify the positive out there like a megaphone. And I want to also do like super special one-on-one positive, right? And then I want to keep my feedback very strategic and giving real action steps to bring it back into the right direction. It should be a problem we're solving together, not necessarily a talking to about what you're doing well, right? If you feel that inner finger wagging happening, it's probably not helpful. And that's just kind of my one-on-one type of management style in a work environment. I think it works. People seem pretty happy. And they have a tendency to start looking at things as a problem to solve an opportunity to come up with some new solutions. Let's put some positive language around everything, right? But they start to assess things. Sometimes they find their own problems and they're like, I really need to work on that. And it's like, oh, wow, you found it all on your own. Cool, right? So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Feedback is very important. So I love that you guys all had your own input to that. So empowerment doesn't always look like motivational speeches or emotional breakthroughs. There's a lot more to it than that. Empowerment can also be just simple as like being inclusive towards others. What are some ways that you all have made your communities and organizations more inclusive? And I feel like, Susan, you elaborated a little bit about this earlier. So if you want to kind of just continue to talk about it, feel free. And everyone else is open to chat too.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that even started Women in Tech Allies off to begin with is we had Raleigh Durham is a tech hub, right? And when I first started getting into the area, we didn't have a lot of areas where you had a broad representation from the market, right? So we have, what I noticed was there were a lot of people that were traditionally the stereotypical developer, right? If you pictured them in your mind, a guy, right? He's probably white. He's probably certain categories that he fits in, but there were people who fit that demographic that were just as interested as in making the place more diverse and making it more open, but finding a space to help, or finding the right method to be a resource, or all of that was kind of limited. It was like, do you really want to be that guy who shows up to the women's group that makes everyone feel uncomfortable? I don't want to be that guy. Like, that's the opposite of what I'm trying to accomplish, right? And so creating spaces where you can network outside of your normal experience. If you walk into most of these areas and you say, look, I'm looking to hire somebody for a particular role, who do you know? Well, most of the time people who know only their own type, right? And so the recommendation is going to end up being exactly what you already have, right? And that's how you end up with these very homogeneous spaces. So create an environment, create opportunities where people can meet people who are different than them. And then the next time somebody says, who do you know? They have a more diverse pool of people in their experience that they can pull from. And so that's one of the things that we try to do with a lot of our networking events is, if you have a little bit of everybody there, you expand things. I think sometimes it's really excellent to have spaces where people who are coming from a diverse background, or for women, or that these pockets are very empowering, because you get to meet people that are like you, that you can see yourself, which is great. But there's another opportunity there when you look at the fact that maybe like 25 to 30% of tech is women, for example. If those women are only networking with themselves, they're seriously limiting their opportunity, right? When you could be networking also with another 30 or 40% of people that are not in that group, that are interested in empowering that group. So just keep in mind that your mentorship and your networking does not have to look like you.
Yeah, I love that, Susan. Those are all great points. I think the only things that I would add that are way more tactical from being able to be more inclusive in the workplace that you can start doing immediately are things like using your pronouns, and that's just general being more inclusive, right? Of being able to integrate things, of looking at how you can be an ally. I think also making sure that you're stepping in when someone gets interrupted. I know that, as females, we get interrupted far more often than men do in meetings, and being able to step in and be more of that mediator in situations where you're taking up for someone who doesn't always get to be spotlighted in a situation, similar to what we talked about earlier, of really making sure that you're highlighting people who should be more visible or get credit for the work that they're being done. So those are really small things, right? And there's so much else you could look at when it comes to like being an ally or just generally speaking, being more inclusive. But those are some very tactical things you can start working on immediately that will really make a huge impact and just act as more of like a trickle down effect to the rest of the organization.
I think I just would like to add, those are both very great points. And I think that knowing your group, if you're getting the feedback, really pay attention to it. Listen to it. It should drive your decisions and it should drive the structure that your group has. Leading a nonprofit organization that trains women globally how to code in a 10-week program in a world where it's really male dominated, we can't just have only women developers be coach mentors because honestly, there's not enough women developers to the ratio of how many want to learn to transition into those technical roles. The ratios are just really drastic that allyship is really a really strong, important partnership. And I think that, what we tend to do is we embrace our allies who want to help out because we need them. We cannot do this without them, right? This is a community and we're going to help uplift each other. But we are also very intentional in understanding that our learners learn best when they do have a woman coach. So we try to partner if we're going to have a male ally be a coach to respect that the way that our group has provided feedback to us that they feel the safest is to make sure that the other coach mentor is a woman. And this is also to help them understand they may not have had a role model who was a woman in tech, right? Before I surely didn't. So it wasn't until I started the Learn to Code program with Rad Women, before I joined their leadership, I was a learner. And I met one of my coach mentors, who was from Brazil, and I just kind of related because she was Latina. And I want to say she was the first Latina mentor I've ever had. And for me, that was, a real transition for me in terms of mindset and thinking through, what I may be able to do. Can I be like her? Or can I, go on to do something like that? So just really listen to your group, and not every group needs the same recipe, right? So make sure that you spend good enough time figuring out what is the right balance.
Thank you. So we're going to head into the last question, but I wanted to let the audience know before we did that, that we do have some time to do some Q&A questions. So remember to add those into the chat now if you'd like to ask anyone in any of the panelists questions. But the last one is around confidence. So an empowered person is a confident person, or at least aiming to be a confident person. What are ways that you all build the confidence of your colleagues? And Blanca, I don't know if you have any good input, but yeah, open for everyone to kind of provide some tips.
I do. So I'm going to share some other advice from that same friend of mine that I referenced earlier. She is great. I think sometimes in having conversations, when you have a relationship with someone and they're sharing something with you, whether it's a positive thing or something that's challenging and you're hearing them. She heard me out when I was hearing about roadblocks and not being able to tackle some of the project areas that I wish that I would like to. I just didn't have the opportunity at the workplace that I was at the time. And she said, well, how about if you want to try this? And I was like, I don't know that I could do that. I don't know that I'd be the right person. I just don't know. And I think she did something very simple. She asked me a question. And that question was, why not you? A very simple question that I just didn't think to ask myself, right? But it forced me to kind of think through, well, if somebody else was having this conversation with me, I probably would tell them, well, you're a rock star and you have this qualification and that qualification and this, so why not you, right? So her just asking me the question, and she didn't need me to really answer it, right? But it was helping me see the questions that I should ask myself to soul search and kind of work through the things that I had to work through for myself. So instead of telling me, she asked me a question to let me figure out that path, right? And I decided to go for the job and I got it. and I've since then been promoted. So it just goes to show that, sometimes we just need to take a step back and think about the questions that we don't know we should be asking ourselves. So that's one that I think helps build confidence, because then they take control and navigate the situation for themselves. I think the other is opening up doors, right? Is this person at meetings that they should be included in? Are they being heard? Are there opportunities that have been passed up? How can I help advocate for this person, right? How can I help them get equipped to, maybe they're not used to speaking out loud and being vocal and advocating for themselves. How can I help them? And then how can I have their back when they're speaking up for themselves? I think it's finding the most opportunities, because sometimes they're being roadblocked by others, and it's just not fair, and it doesn't need to be that way. So help get more opportunities and vouch for people. Be a coach, mentor. If it's something technical, figure out a way how to have brainstorming solutions with them on how to approach technical, where you're helping them navigate the thought process. And when they hit a barrier, they're not sure, talk about it. Have a conversation about why would you approach it that way, or why that may not be a good approach or a solution to something, so that they can get stronger in those technical aspects so they can grow. Listening is key, because you're not going to have trust, and people are not going to grow if they feel like you have malicious intentions and you're not really knowing who they truly are and what their aspirations are. So that is key. And then amplifying. I think Susan and maybe even Amanda mentioned it before, but like, if there's a win, even if it's a small win, amplify that. If it's an accomplishment that maybe nobody did, help bring that to, this is why that's so badass. Like, we need to share that with others. And it's not always easy to do brags on yourself, right? So I think it's for us to kind of put this culture of, it's okay to do a humble brag, and you should, because you deserve it and you worked hard and you're a rock star. So I think that those are kind of the other ways that I can think of that come immediately with helping to build confidence. It's really just looking out for one another, staying human, and helping each other out.
Blanca, I think we can all agree that you have an amazing friend. So pass that
Yes.
message along.
I will.
Well, I totally agree with everything Blanca said. I think the only thing I would add to that is sometimes, and similar to what Blanca's friend did for her, it's about pushing people outside of their comfort zone to see what they're really capable of. I think a lot of us, like, again, Blanca mentioned, we kind of shoot ourselves down or think, I'm not ready for that opportunity, or I couldn't possibly take that on. Or we look at someone who's 7 levels above us and way more experienced, and always tend to compare ourselves to the level they're currently at versus where they started. So I think it's so much about reminding people what they are really capable of and how much they can do, and also trying to figure out what are people's skill sets, right? So there's a lot of people in this world who don't know what they're good at, and sometimes it just takes someone else to point out, hey, you're actually really strong at public speaking. Have you ever thought about doing trainings or something to that effect, of really helping them to kind of find their way, and again, just pointing them in the right direction. So I think that goes a long way.
I want to say a little bit about a famous, wonderful term that we use a lot now, imposter syndrome, and people getting, kind of undermining their own self-confidence. And it's like they're gaslighting themselves, right? And I think that it's really good to validate people's experience. I see a lot, particularly when you're dealing with very technical roles, where people are like, I don't understand why this doesn't work, or I feel like this is totally wrong and I don't know why. And you get into the weeds on something, and you're trying to learn something new or apply some new technology that you haven't done before. And you start to feel like, why do I even do this? Am I good at this? I don't even think I'm a real, you have so many sit there and say, am I really a developer? Do I know how to code? Why can't I do this? Right. And I think that sometimes they just need the validation of, yep, been right there before. Yep. Totally been there. Totally done that. You're right on track. It's okay. Sometimes I tell myself that, like, I'm right on track. I've done this before. And so giving them, giving them some validation. You're not crazy. You're right. You'll get it. Keep plugging away. Everyone feels that way, right? The other thing I would say is definitely opening up opportunities. So, I mean, when I have the unique experience, unfortunately, it should be for everyone. I wish it's for everyone soon, but I have the experience of, I get people asking me about who do you know for a particular role all the time, right? And I will take the time to go back through my network and try to figure out who might be looking for their next step, who this might be good for. I wish the people in my network were more open about what their next steps are, or what they might be open to, or what their interests are, so that it was easier for me to match them with opportunities. But I find myself, matching people with opportunities all the time. And so if you have an excellent network and you get those, recruiter emails that say, hey, we're trying to fill this position, just taking the 5-10 minutes it takes to go back and kind of scroll through your list of people and say, you know what, might be looking for a next step, right? Taking the time to do that. And if you are connecting with somebody who could be that mentor, or could be that person that could be your bridge to your next step, letting them know what you want, thinking about your 5-year, where do I see myself, and letting them know that, so that they can answer that question for you. Using your network, it benefits everybody for you to actually use your network. You make these connections, don't just make the connection and then just, that's it, right? So, check in, say hi, ask what they're doing, tell them what you're doing, and keep in touch. It's even just a touch point every 6 months or every year is enough to be at the top of somebody's mind when they are looking to fill an opportunity. So, yeah, I love making connections for people.
That was a great point. And as a recruiter myself, I will say, I wish more people, I just don't think it's a thought sometimes of the fact that you could utilize your network the way you can. And it is interesting. Some people are great about it, and some people are like, I didn't even think of my peers that I work with that could potentially be a good fit. So hopefully that it just becomes, I think as we honestly keep utilizing even more like technology, like platforms, people will realize like what the actual benefit is there. But thank you so much for all of your points today. We don't have many questions, probably because you guys covered so many great points during the conversation, but Jadine in the chat did make an interesting point, which I think kind of does go for everything that you all said, but it can be exhausting, honestly, to try to like help empower other people, especially when you need to be kind of empowering yourself along the way. So, I mean, even Susan, you just bringing up like just trying to like utilize your network, like that can be a lot of time and just mentally to like think about who to reach out to. So how do you all like inspire yourselves to empower others? Like what about that makes you feel great?
I'll go quickly because I know y'all probably want to answer this too, but I just had this experience where I was having a really bad day, but I had to have 2 one-on-ones and 2 hard conversations to try and empower 2 other people on my team. And I was so exhausted, and I just kept thinking, well, who's going to talk to me today? Because I talked to everybody else. I'm just so tired. And so naturally I came home and took it out on my partner, just like everybody else. But that is something that I think is a real struggle, because you have to, one, be in the right mindset. And I think that day I probably should have just rescheduled those calls, because I was not in the mental space where I wanted to have those conversations. They ended up fine for the other people, but for myself, it was very taxing. And so I think making sure that you're in that right space and the right energy, and then also taking small steps. So we've talked a lot about very tactical things that you can take away from this to help empower people. It doesn't have to be life-changing, right? It can be something that is small, that is working our way towards the bigger picture. And that's really the other piece, is looking at what is that bigger picture? How are you going to inspire this person and help them years down the road? And maybe this one conversation might be very isolated, but that conversation, like so much of what Blanca's friend has talked about, can be life-changing later on. So just thinking about, how am I going to help them, you know, further down the road?
I would say you don't have to be everything to everyone. You know, you can find what your thing is. I think the reason why I got inspired was that you know, I did come into tech in a very non-traditional way, because I went through boot camp, and you know, I've been in a completely different industry, and so you know, it kind of is my hot button, I get a special feeling for those who are going through a boot camp, you know, because I know that struggle, and I know trying to get your first position after a career switch is a big deal. You know, just one place, somebody take a shot on me, right? And you're just pleading for somebody to be nice and let me in. So I think that if you can find something that actually like you can connect with, it gives you that motivation to try to make a change in that particular area. But you don't have to be, you know, all things to all people all the time. Definitely putting some boundaries around it, time boxing around it, things like that. And also leaving some of it, you know, particularly if it's things like mentorship or sponsorship or things like that, you know, the more energy someone puts in, the more you can give back to them. It's not the kind of space where you're going to like drag them kicking and screaming through their career, right? They have to be engaged and trying to do stuff. And then you just give them that little boost. You're just like that little piece of NOS, right? On what they're already trying and going in a certain direction. You just kind of give them a little boop, right? And that's all you need to do. And maybe you're enough to get them over that next hump, or over, you know, whatever it is that they're trying to do. So, but any little thing is a good thing. So it doesn't have to be like a big sweeping, like you don't have to start the WIDA in your area and have 1,700 members and run the show and all this kind of stuff. It can be just that twice a year when you see a position and you go through your network, right? And that little bit can make a huge difference for somebody. So.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I know that we are at time, and it is a earlier in the day webinar if you're located in the US. So I know lots of folks have meetings to get to, but again, thank you very much. We did record. It will get shared. And just real quick before my panelists log off, can I get like a quick little screenshot smile from y'all? All right. Hey, Karen. Yeah, jump on in. All right. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. And then Karen, if you want to close this out.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you to our amazing panelists. That was a really inspiring conversation. And I know I saw a couple people in chat, like dropping the nuggets early. So much great wisdom that you shared with all of us. It was wonderful to be with you. And to Elizabeth and Breaking the Glass, we appreciate our partnership with you so much. Thank you for helping us to bring this kind of programming to our employees at Lumen. And to all my Lumen humans on this call, everything that you do, driving our employee resource groups and helping us collectively work together to create an environment where we are educating, elevating, and empowering each other. Thank you to all of you for being here. You are loved and appreciated, and we couldn't do this work without you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
All right.
Thank
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a good rest of your day.